Department of Homeland Security's public charge inadmissibility rule. Last week, I had the honor of leading a trip with several of my fellow senators to Brownsville, Texas, to see the border crisis up front and firsthand for myself, the border crisis created by Joe Biden as Title 42 was coming to an end. We met a lot of people on the trip, and I want to share some of their thoughts, some of their concerns. We met a young former Marine officer who said he felt safer in Afghanistan than he did in southern Texas right now. Local residents were bracing for the impact with 170,000 people just across the border waiting to come across with the end of Title 42. Families were gearing up to protect their families against the cartels very specifically. We met a fifth-generation rancher who was leaving his family ranch and moving his family into town. And even that night, he was teaching his wife how to load a 410 gauge shotgun to protect their family. We met officers. Many of these officers were multi-generational. Their fathers, their grandparents had served on the border, and they said it was worse than they've ever seen in their lifetime. Something new on this trip, we were told that 90 Chinese military-aged nationalists are entering illegally every day in South Texas. As we all know, over 6 million people have entered the country illegally since President Biden took office. 6 million people. That's twice the size of my home state of Kansas. Another 1.5 million people have evaded apprehension and entered the country, gotaways, as they call them on the border. Thousands upon thousands more continue to overwhelm our borders. I think we all realize our immigration system is broken, but rather than fix the problem, this administration continues to point fingers and find ways to ignore or abuse our laws to provide pathways for illegal immigrants to come here. Many of the people crossing our border will get to roam freely throughout our country. They leave our intake facilities with a cell phone and a court date that's 4 to 5 years from the date they entered. I think we're all kidding ourselves if we think these folks will ever show up for those dates in 5 years. Now, despite breaking our laws, they will be long gone, settled into communities across the country. In fact, on our trip, law enforcement officers told me 90% of the migrants are not showing up for these court dates so far. Sure, they're going to seek citizenship down the road. There's no doubt about that. And open border colleagues across the aisle will no doubt call for amnesty for all of them. We expect President Biden will support that. He's said that as much himself, broadcasting across the globe that you can take advantage of the benefits we provide despite breaking our laws. Now, I think it's fair to say that Americans have the most generous legal immigration standards in the world. But we have to draw a line somewhere. Since the 1800s, our nation has required foreign nationals seeking admissions to the United States to show that they can take care of it for themselves without becoming a public charge or burdening the taxpayers. Most nations require you to have a job before you come into their country. We just don't want you to become a public charge if you want to become a permanent citizen. Being a public charge is a ground of inadmissibility under our immigration laws. Let me say that again. Being a public charge is a ground of inadmissibility under our immigration laws. Congress specifically directed the executive branch to consider various factors when allowing people into this great nation. These factors include age, health, family status, assets, resources, and financial status, along with education and skills. Indeed, as recently as 1996, Congress clearly declared in a policy statement included in the Personal Responsibility and Work Opportunity Reconciliation Act of 1996 that self-sufficiency is a basic principle of the United States immigration law and should continue to be a governing principle in the United States. Specifically, the Immigration and Nationality Act makes an alien who is an applicant for a visa, admission, or adjustment of status inadmissible if he or she is likely at a time to become a public charge. The public charge ground of inadmissibility therefore applies to aliens applying for a visa to come to the United States temporarily or permanently for admission or to adjust their status to that of a lawful permanent resident, with some limited exceptions. We need an immigration system that welcomes the best and the brightest, but we need to limit the cycle of chain migration. Again, we need some type of guardrails. While we open our hearts to asylum seekers, we must also build a merit-based immigration system that considers an immigrant's potential contributions to our economy, to our communities, and our future. We don't want a system that rewards idleness and reliance on taxpayer-funded benefits. Under the previous administration, the Department of Homeland Security issued a rule that would have required immigrants seeking to remain in the country to be self-sufficient. But under President Biden, the regulations have changed. Now, my hope is to override the Biden public charge rule today with a vote here in the Senate. The Biden administration's public charge rule makes a mockery of the law and the intent of Congress to ensure that immigrants are self-sufficient. According to an estimate by the Federation of Americans for Immigration Reform, at the start of 2023, the net cost of illegal immigration for the United States at the federal, state, and local levels was at least $150 billion. Again, since the start of 2023, the cost to taxpayers, $150 billion. Now, this number is going to increase drastically if this rule stands. Our resolution of disapproval would rescind the Biden public charge rule and hopefully spur this administration to come to the table and craft a solution that will ensure the self-sufficiency of immigrants and protect American taxpayers. I encourage my colleagues to vote in support of this CRA of disapproval to introduce some sanity into our immigration system. Thank you, Mr. President. I yield the floor.